All right, I think we're ready to go. So if y'all want to grab a seat and we'll get started. Yeah. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think we're going to get our meeting started. I'm John Anagnost. I work in the Planning and Urban Design Department at the City of Savannah. And I'll let you know that at the end of the presentation, we're going to be doing an activity at the tables. So we encourage you to go ahead and sit at a table now and try to be in groups of at least 3 or 4 so you can have a discussion during the activity with your neighbors. All right. And President Jackson from the Neighborhood Association is with us this afternoon. Would you like to share any remarks?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to see those who are here, and I'm praying that more will come. You all know we got the postcards in the mail, and we got the door markers, so everyone here knows what this is about. This is in reference to zoning for Hudson Hill Bayview area. And we've been going at this for years, long before I became president, long before I came into the neighborhood. We try to make sure that we get our zoning set, concrete, that we will know that we will not get any intrusion in this area, no more than what we already have. So I don't have anything more to say. I want to turn it over to John. And as he said, they have us sitting at tables, and I guess later he will talk about that. But I want to thank everyone for coming out today, because this is our community and this is what we need to do. We need to take time out to take care of our community. We can't always say what the city is not doing if we are not here on them to do something. And I must say that Bridget, Liddy, and John have been coming out to us whenever we ask them to. At short notice, they've been coming out to make sure that they hear our concerns. So thank you all for being here today.
All right. Now I'll introduce our other members of the city staff who are here today. Director of Planning and Urban Design, Bridget Liddy, is here in the back. Akila Wright, Susie Bull, Zarina Davis, and then from the Metropolitan Planning Commission, Edward Morrow. All right. So we're here to talk about zoning in the Hudson Hill Bayview neighborhood. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of background of zoning, and then we're going to have 3 big picture topics that we're going to talk about that came out of a neighborhood plan from 2019. And then we're going to really dig into the specifics. Today is going to be about the residential zoning in Hudson Hill. Okay, so when we're talking about Hudson Hill and Bayview, this is basically the area that we're talking about. So between West Lathrop and East Lathrop, north of West Bay Street, and then behind the neighborhood is the county's jurisdiction. And so you can see that a little bit better on the map in the back. And so the City of Savannah does not have control, basically, of any zoning west of West Lathrop, east of East Lathrop, and behind this line here, this is Clearview. So basically that rear portion, as you get towards the port, we don't have zoning control over that. All right, so this is our zoning map. I know this map is not very helpful because all the zoning districts are shown in red, but this is a little bit more clear. And so zoning is a set of local laws that control what private property owners are allowed to build, what types of housing, what types of businesses, where structures can be placed on their property, and what other infrastructure they have to provide when they build something. And so on this map, you can see there's a red is basically retail and commercial. The purple is industrial. The yellow is low density or single family residential. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is this yellow area that says RSF 6. That means residential single family 6. And then you see in orange, the orange is multifamily. And the pink is basically more retail and commercial. So we're going to focus today on the low density residential. So in 2019, there was a plan that was adopted for Hudson Hill Bayview, a neighborhood plan. And there were action items that came out of that plan that said the zoning in this area should be modified to reflect concerns of the neighborhood and needs for the future. And so part of that was expected to be done through the city's own change to the entire zoning ordinance, which was called NewZo and was approved in the fall of 2019. But it was always anticipated that there would be more zoning activity after NUZO that would be led by the neighborhood to really look at some of the details of the zoning. And so what those details were, as stated in that plan, and I'll zoom in on this to make it a little larger for you, but that's a screenshot from the plan, is to preserve the single-family residential character, to limit commercial uses, to basically focus commercial uses to the east of Carolyn Street and along Bay Street and not have commercial outside of those areas, and then to encourage development of a neighborhood commercial district east of Carolyn Street, so between Carolyn Street and East Lathrop. And so we'll talk a little bit about those ideas, but really the one we're going to focus on today is number one, single-family residential zoning. But to give you a little bit about some of the other issues in the neighborhood, the city is aware that there are a lot of industrial uses here. And we have been taking action to ensure that those industrial uses are operating according to the ordinances. We can't force them to shut down. They have rights under their zoning to operate certain industrial uses. But what we can do is make sure that they are not violating any of the city's codes. And so there's been a couple of cases that have come up recently that we have started enforcement action on through the city's code compliance department. So this is, and I'll move out of the way here. This is West Bay Street. This is a conveyor belt manufacturing company. They purchased a home lot behind their property and combined it with their property, and they've been parking vehicles there. That's not allowed because the rear part of the property is zoned residential, so they can't have any activity related to their business on that residentially zoned property. So they have a code compliance case opened on them, and if they don't correct that issue by removing those vehicles, they will have to appear in recorder's court. Similar story here. So this is Damon Street and Carolyn, where the multifamily housing is on the eastern side of the neighborhood. Again, this is a warehouse, and they have been placing vehicles and containers on the property that is really part of these apartments, and this is zoned residential. That's not allowed. They have a code case opened on them. If they don't remove those, they will have to go to recorder's court. This owner has pretty quickly agreed to remove all these items, and they said that they will be removing those. And then we have the Colonial site in the northwest of the neighborhood. So that's the oil company, and this is a shipping warehouse where they ship lubricants from. This was approved as a warehouse and shipping business, not for outdoor storage of chemicals and oils. So we are looking at the history of what was approved there, making sure we have all our research, and we are likely to get code compliance to also open a case on them, specifically in reference to having the tanks outdoors. Now, they would still be allowed to keep things inside their warehouse and have trucks and shipping, but in terms of storing these materials on an open lot, we believe they're not allowed to do that. Okay, but just a little bit more about industrial uses. Like I said, they have rights because they have industrial zoning in most cases, and in some cases, even if the use that they had, the type of business that they have now, if it's not currently allowed, in some cases it's been there for so long that it was allowed in the past and they are aged in. And so we can't retroactively force them to do things like add landscaping buffers around the edges of their property. If that wasn't required when they first started, we can't go back and force them to do it now unless if they make significant changes to their property. So if they build new buildings, put additions on their existing buildings, pave new parking areas, when they do things like that, then we can say, okay, you've made a change. Now we can enforce the current landscaping requirements, but until they make those changes, we can't force them to do that. Yes.
It's not legal for them to have their trucks drive throughout the residential area and power lines. Because an issue just happened 2 months ago. They popped my electrical line and my cable line.
Okay.
Since then it was fixed. But I don't think that should be allowed for them to allow the driver to drive throughout the residential area and pop the line.
Yeah. Okay, so the comment there was that trucks are driving through residential areas and damaging power lines and cable lines. And so the city does have a set of designated truck routes, and they are required legally to use the truck routes, and if they don't, they can get a ticket. So that's not really a zoning issue, that's a traffic issue, but we're going to mark that on our board. So we have a board over here, we're going to mark these topics, and we're going to respond to those, follow up with those. So we will follow up with that with the traffic department at the city and make sure that they are keeping track of what the truck routes are. Okay.
That issue has been addressed several times with the traffic department. Okay, but these people that come and do that, like what happened with her, you can't control because they're going to just break the law. And so that's when, I don't know what we can do about that. We've been having that issue. But they're not allowed.
Yeah. Enforcement is a challenge. Yeah. It's difficult to have traffic police out every day because they have other responsibilities. Enforcement is a challenge. That's true. All right. So the next topic is the neighborhood commercial area that was discussed in the neighborhood plan from 2019. And so that's something that we would like to talk about with the neighborhood in the future. That's not going to be our topic today, but we can have a similar meeting to this one in the future to discuss that. And so basically what we would look at is some of these types of zoning districts to potentially be applied on the east side, the east end of the neighborhood. And so we have community business, neighborhood business, limited business, office and institutional transition. And so essentially these allow us to cater or tailor the types of businesses that are allowed in that zoning to how intense or how commercial you want the area to be. So community business is the widest range. That allows things like vehicle repair shops, gas stations. So some things that might not be appropriate inside of a neighborhood. But then when you get to neighborhood business and limited business, those more intense uses are not allowed, and you really are limited to things just like regular retail, offices, doctor's offices. And then once you get to office and institutional, you actually lose even more, like restaurants are no longer allowed, and you really are just limited to basically offices and some types of retail. So you can set up the zoning to say what really is the range of businesses that we want to have be allowed in the future in an area, and then we can have a zoning action that puts those on the map. But that'll be a future conversation, and today we're focusing on the residential. And so this is the area that was identified in the neighborhood plan. So basically from Carolyn over to East Lathrop. And you can see there's already some of that neighborhood business, but there's also light industrial. And I think those are the areas we would look at and say, is that better as a business or an office district? All right, so for the focus of today's meeting, we're going to be talking about residential zoning, and specifically that residential single family 6 zoning that's on the west end of the neighborhood. And so what we want to talk about is how can we match the zoning to the lots that are already in Hudson Hill? So there's a variety of lot sizes in Hudson Hill, and the RSF 6 zoning is not necessarily the best fit for all of those in terms of the amount of lot width that it requires. So it has a certain minimum width that it's requiring of each lot, and also a minimum area that it requires of each lot. So we'd like to see, does that actually fit? There are existing duplexes in Hudson Hill. Residential single family does not allow duplexes at all. And so if you wanted to put an addition on an existing duplex, you have to ask for permission from the Zoning Board of Appeals to be able to do that, because it's what's called a non-conforming use. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what non-conforming means in just a second. We also want to talk today about, are there other types of housing besides duplex that the neighborhood that you would be interested to make available in Hudson Hill for someone to build if they own property here? And then accessory dwelling units. So accessory dwelling unit is basically a small dwelling unit that's on the same lot as a single family house or a duplex, and it's limited to 1 bedroom, so it has to be a fairly small unit, but allows someone to have an extra dwelling that they could rent out to someone else, or if they wanted to live there, and they could rent out the primary house. Okay. So non-conforming. We'll get there in just a moment. So let's talk about residential single family 6. The minimum lot width is 60 feet. The minimum lot area is 6,000 square feet. So that's what the zoning is right now. That's what it requires. And so about 70% of the lots in the neighborhood currently match that. And we'll see that. We have a map that shows that in just a moment. And so duplexes that are no longer allowed are called nonconforming if they are vacant for more than a year. If you have a duplex right now and it's vacant for more than a year, you have to ask for permission from the Zoning Board of Appeals to come back and use it again. Otherwise, you have to convert it to single family. The other thing about nonconformity, so for a nonconforming lot, so a lot that is not 60 feet wide and does not have 6,000 square feet of area, that's also a form of nonconformity. You can still build a single family house on a lot that is too narrow and too small. You're always pretty much allowed to build a single family house, but you still have to meet the setbacks, which is the distance that the building is from the property boundaries. And there's also a concept called building coverage, which is the amount of the lot area that the building takes up. And there's a limit to that. So you still have to meet that, but you can build a single family house. All right, so nonconforming, I've gotten a little bit at this with the specifics, but in general, a nonconformity is something that was legal in the past. Somebody built a house or subdivided a lot. It was legal when they did that. The zoning rules changed at some point, and it became illegal under the current rules. And so what the law says is that you have rights to continue to use that house because you built it when it was legal, or in this case, a duplex. So that nonconformities can continue to be used, but there are limitations, certain things you can't do unless you get permission from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that costs $620 to apply for that, and it takes about 6 weeks to go through that process. And so, that is a little bit of a burden for somebody if they had something that was legal when they put it in, to say now you've got to pay $600 and wait 6 weeks, and there's some chance that it doesn't get approved anyway. That's something that we'd like to hear from you. What are the ways that we can reduce the situations where that's required? And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, is what is the right zoning for the existing housing and potentially new housing where you're going to have fewer nonconformities, fewer times when you're going to have to go to the zoning board, and also that new development fits with your vision for this neighborhood. All right. So let's get into some of the specifics about what do I mean by zoning? What are the standards that we're talking about? So we are going to talk today about lot width. So that's pretty straightforward. How wide is the lot? And most of the lots in Hudson Hill are rectangular. So, it's pretty simple. Some lots are 30 feet wide, some are 40, some are 50, some are 60, some are even larger. So lot width. We talk about duplexes. Let me move out of the way here. When you have a duplex, our zoning ordinance usually applies what's called a lot width per unit, which says in a single family house, the RSF 6 zoning says you need 60-foot wide lot. If you have a duplex in one of our duplex zoning districts, it will say something like you need 36 feet of lot width per unit. You have 2 units in a duplex, so to have a duplex, you need a 72-foot wide lot. So that's an example of an existing standard in our zoning, but we could create a custom standard for Hudson Hill. So if you said, we think it would be appropriate for someone to be able to have a duplex on a 60-foot wide lot, we think that fits in our neighborhood, then we could make a standard where we say, for a duplex in Hudson Hill, you need 30 feet of lot width per unit, and so for a duplex, you would need a 60-foot wide lot. We can come up with rules like that. All right, lot area, very similar story. And so lot area, again, pretty straightforward. How many square feet is the lot? And there's a minimum lot area required for a single family house, 6,000 square feet. And so, like I said, if you have an existing lot that's 30 feet or 40 feet or 50 feet, you could still build a single family house under the, the nonconformity situation. But what the other thing that's important about the minimum lot area is people could potentially subdivide their land to create more lots. So if I had a lot that was 90 feet wide, if the minimum lot width is 60 feet, I cannot subdivide that, and if the minimum lot area is 6,000 square feet and it's a 9,000 square foot lot, I can't subdivide that into 2 lots. If you reduce those things to 45 feet and 4,500 square feet, you could subdivide a 90-foot lot into 2 lots and have 2 houses. And so that's kind of something to think through. When people have larger lots, do you want them to be able to split them in 2? And if they are going to split them in 2, what is the smallest lot you would think is appropriate for Hudson Hill? Is it 40 feet wide? Is it 50 feet wide? Is it 30 feet wide? That's something we want to talk about today. And then the same thing with duplexes. Lot area per unit. So if you want to have a duplex, how much lot area do you need per unit? Is it 3,000 square feet? 4,000 square feet? We can make those rules custom for Hudson Hill. Front and rear setbacks, so that's the distance that a house is placed from the front property line and the rear property line. Currently it's 20 feet for both under the zoning here, so 20 feet. The house has to be set back 20 feet from the front property line and has to be forward 20 feet from the rear property line. One thing that's important to know about front setbacks is that in most cases, there is a little bit of land area between the street and the private property line that is technically part of the city's right-of-way. And so a lot of times when people think about a setback, they'll say, oh, I need 20 feet from the curb or 20 feet from the asphalt. But you really have to pay attention to where does the actual property boundary start. In a lot of cases, that's about 5 to 10 feet behind the curb, and there's actually 5 to 10 feet of your front yard that is in the public right-of-way. So that's just important to be aware of. But there is a range of front setbacks here in Hudson Hill. So there are setbacks all the way from houses right up on the front property line to setback 20 feet. You have basically everything within that range exists in Hudson Hill.
So,
Yes.
on the average, when you're saying setback 20 feet from the property line, there's usually how many feet or how many feet to the city line?
It really depends on the street. So you can see in this case, it's about 5 feet. There's other streets where it's probably 10 feet or more. And so and you can actually, you have your maps on your table, and you can kind of look down those streets and you can see where is that orange property line on that picture and where do I actually see the asphalt of the street. And in some cases it's going to be wider, some cases it's going to be narrower. And so that's just important to think about when you're looking at those examples. And that's what that map is for on your table, to kind of be able to look at the houses in the neighborhood and use that to drive your thinking to see there's the range of houses that are existing already. Where are they on the lot?
So as a city, when you look at this map, there's nothing that tells us how many feet the setbacks are. So how do we look at this and say, oh, this is 5 feet, this is 10 feet?
Yeah, it's difficult for us to mark that on there accurately. We will help you at your table. We have table facilitators, and so we'll give you a general sense of how far that distance is. We'll help you work through that. Yeah. All right. In some zoning districts, there is what's called a front setback range or a build to, and so what that says is, because a regular setback says your house has to be at least 20 feet away from the front property line. In some zoning districts, it says your house must be between 5 and 10 feet from the front property line. So there's actually a minimum and a maximum, and you can't push your house too far back. And that's typical in older neighborhoods where the pattern was to build houses close to the street, close to the sidewalk, that we have zoning that says you have to continue that pattern and build houses close to the sidewalk. So that is something you could potentially choose. It does sometimes become a little bit restrictive, but that's an option. Side setbacks is 5 feet currently on both sides. And then if you're on a corner lot, you have a street on the side of your house. On corner lots, the side setback is 10 feet from the side street. So 5 feet if you're in the middle of a block on both sides, but if you're on a corner lot, it's 10 feet on the side. All right, and then housing types. So zoning districts control what types of housing are permitted. So like I said, the current zoning for Hudson Hill, residential single family, only allows single-family housing, does not allow duplexes. And so that's one of the big topics that we have heard in the past, is that there is interest in legalizing existing duplexes and potentially allowing additional duplexes to be built in the future. So that's a question we're going to talk about today. And then, could there be other types of housing, specifically 3-family and 4-family? So that, essentially means a building that has 3 dwelling units in it, or a building that has 4 dwelling units in it. And you can basically apply a lot of the same standards to those buildings so that they look basically like a house. So it would have the same setbacks, it would have the same maximum lot coverage, it would have the same maximum height, and so it would have to fit into the same, basically, the same area of the lot that a house would. It would just potentially have more units. So that's something we could consider as well. All right. So here's the area we're focusing on, and this is the same area that you have on the maps on your table. This is the area of Hudson Hill that is zoned residential single family 6. And then this is a breakdown of the lots that currently meet the minimum lot width of 60 feet. So this dark purplish blue color is the lots that meet the standard. So you can see it's a pretty good amount. Like I said, it's about 70%. But you can see particularly all the orange, those are 30-foot lots. And then the pink color is mostly 40-foot lots. So you do have a good number of 30 and 40-foot lots in Hudson Hill. And so those are non-conforming. And so again, you can build a single-family house, even if the lot is too narrow and doesn't meet the minimum lot area. You can always build a single-family house. But I think that gets to the question of subdivision. So if you said the minimum lot width is 30 feet and the minimum lot area is 3,000 square feet, all of these dark blue lots could then be subdivided into 2 lots, if that's what the property owner chose to do. If you say the minimum lot width is 40 feet or 50 feet, then that's not possible. You would need a wider lot to be able to do that. And then this is similar. You'll see that this map follows basically the same pattern because most of the lots in Hudson Hill are the same depth. And so area then at that point is just a product of the width of the lot. So this is the lot area. Again, the green color basically corresponds directly with that dark blue from the previous map. So those are 60 foot and larger. And then you can see the other 5,000, 4,000, and below 4,000. So again, a fair number of lots that are 5,000 square feet or less, and so not meeting the minimum area currently. All right, so we're ready to jump into our table activity. So what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to have 4 questions, which basically correspond to the zoning standards that we just went through: setbacks, lot area, lot width, and housing types. And we're going to ask you to discuss at your table, what do you think is the right zoning standard for that topic? And so we're going to give you about 8 minutes for each question. Then we're going to ask you to move to the next question. We'll go through our 4 questions. And then at the end, we're going to ask each table to report out just one idea that you thought was interesting that came out of your discussion. So we're not going to report out all of our notes from your discussion. We don't want to take up too much of your time this afternoon. So we're just going to ask each table to report one thing that you thought was particularly interesting. And then after that, we will close the meeting. So do we have a question?
Yes, sir. So you talked about duplexes.
Yes.
And the challenge of duplexes in dividing a lot, assuming that the duplex would be side by side. What are the models under consideration, or could we consider 2-story duplexes or front to back duplexes that's happening in a lot of places in Atlanta right now?
That's a very intuitive question. So the question was, are we considering both side-by-side duplexes and over and under duplexes? And the answer is yes. And that's actually going to be exactly one of the questions on our table activity. One of the questions where we talk about housing types, we're going to ask you, do you have a preference? Would you rather it only be side-by-side, or would you allow both side-by-side and over and under? So we'll answer that question as part of your table activity. Yeah.
Some of these lots, especially the smaller ones that you indicated, the lot line
Yeah. What happens then? Yeah, what happens when a lot line goes through the middle of a house? So that is fairly common. It's less common to have the actual tax parcel. This is going to get into a little bit of a nuance, but so in a lot of older neighborhoods, when the company or the person who subdivided that neighborhood originally subdivided it, they subdivided it into equal increments. In Hudson Hill, it looks like that was 30-foot widths. And then people could buy as many of those increments as they wanted. So some people would buy just one, some people buy two and have a 60-foot lot, some people buy three and have a 90-foot wide lot. And then they would build their house in the middle of that width, which meant a lot of times it was on top of the line between those two lots. In a lot of cases, the Chatham County Board of Assessors, the property tax assessor, will over time just put those lots together into a single property tax account. For some reason, in some cases, they don't. They leave them as separate tax lots, tax parcels. And so that is technically a nonconformity. And if that person wants to expand, put an addition on their house, in a lot of cases, they're going to have to ask for permission from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so it's probably in that person's interest to go to the Board of Assessors and say, can I put this into one tax parcel? Yeah. Okay, yep. So let's get started with our table exercise. And so the date of that image is sometime in 2023. So it's almost 2 years old. We don't have those types of photos, super recent. That's the latest we could get. All right. So for our, you can continue to ask questions. I'm going to go around, and if you have questions, you can flag me over. But we'd like to get started with our table exercise. So our first question is going to be introduced by Akila. This is a little bit more clear. That means residential single family 6. If they are vacant for more than a year. There's a red is basically retail and commercial. The purple is industrial. Then you have others like this. All right, so we are going to hear from each table. Susie's going to go around and provide a microphone because we are live streaming today, and we're going to be recording this and making the recording available later on the city website. So we're going to ask each table to give us one idea or item that you thought was an interesting conversation out of all the 4 questions that you talked about. Just give us one item that you thought was interesting. Susie's going to come over with the microphone. So we'll start over here.
Right here. Now, this doesn't project your voice. It just records your voice. So you still have to talk so that other people can hear you, okay?
And you can stand up if you want to.
You don't have to if you don't want to. It's up to you.
I would.
Please, everybody, can we, the table in the back, please?
I would just like to say that I just like for everything to remain on the 30-feet lot, but to my understanding, it's already been zoned for 60 to my understanding. But our rep thing stay at quarter like it is. So on a 30-feet lot, that's my suggestion.
All right, so that was a suggestion for 30-foot lot width for single family. All right, this table here.
She's going to go ahead and explain.
Well, what was curious to me was, or interesting to me, was the new duplex possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I would like to see new duplexes, and the opportunity for pre-existing duplexes to be put back into operation.
All right, so that was, go ahead.
And I think one of the other things we did right here, just show a little bit of that, about the 4. You remember, you all mentioned about the 37. Do you remember that number, 37?
For duplexes, that's an example from a different zoning district that it was a minimum of 36 feet per unit for duplex.
Right.
Yep.
So we're considering if that can be applicable.
Well, you could pick your own lot width per unit, right? So if
Okay,
you want to
so-
allow duplexes, you could say it's 36, you could say 30, you could go less than that. That's what we want to get from y'all today is what is that right size for Hudson Hill. All right, so that was a conversation in favor of allowing duplexes and legalizing historic duplexes.
Just to be clear, it's 36 per unit, so if you got size 2 units, so it won't be 36. Okay.
We were concerned about the duplexes, and we've come to the conclusion that maybe duplexes should not be allowed in the community. We thought about the fact that if we allowed one set of duplexes, then we have a community of duplexes. So the ones that are here now, okay, maybe they could be brought up to standard, but no extra. We don't want duplexes.
Okay, so a conversation not in favor of new duplexes. Thank you.
Here, who would like to speak? Anybody?
So we had a unanimous decision to allow more ADUs. You were all in favor of more ADUs.
All right, so that discussion was about being in favor of allowing more accessory dwelling units.
Would you like to speak? Or representative?
We thought that single family was what it has been since the 40s and that we would like to see that continue. And the parking is an issue now, particularly on Hudson Street. And if you are thinking about a 20-foot setback in the front and the back and allowing parking and the safety of having appropriate parking would be an issue.
All right, so note about retaining single-family character and ensuring sufficient front setbacks to allow for parking to reduce on-street parking. Great.
Okay. Would you like to speak, Tom?
Thank you. We talked about 60-foot minimum widths for lot sizes in order to allow parking and for that same thing, that Hudson Street, so narrow in many of the other streets. So a 60-foot width lot would allow a house with a parking pad next to it.
Okay, so support for a minimum 60-foot width for single family. All right.
Would you all like to speak?
I think so, yeah. Sure, yeah.
Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. This is all the
Thank you. This is great. Glad to see everybody out. We needed to have this conversation so desperately. So when I'm representing you, I would feel like I have my marching orders so we could get what it is that we need. This session is about data gathering. And like they told you, they're going to take this data back and put it in some type of report, and we'll find out the results soon. But I wanted to just mention Hudson Hill is quite different, being such a historical community and how old we are. We weren't a planned community. We sort of just morphed from the plantation to a community, a neighborhood. Then they tried to build a grid around it with the Jasperville grid and those things. And at the time when our grants were sharecropping for the city and for private entities, they were very industrious people. So they happened to make enough money where they were told, y'all going up there and choose you one of them lots on that hill. So when they came, there was no zoning in place. And they, to the best of their ability, they drew out and measured out their lots. So if you look at the map now, once the city came along and placed the zoning in place and the lot grid in place, you'll see that some of the lines actually go through some of the houses. Actually, Friendship Church that was built in 1895, the whole front porch is in the street if you look at the way that the grid is drawn. I think a line goes through my house. But so there's going to have to be some type of special historical appreciation in the zoning to recognize those houses that were probably built prior to maybe 1975, 74. And I'm saying that time because those were the years when we got paved streets, and then they finally started gritting things out, paving the streets. So now you know where the curb was, because before, you know what we had, Deborah? We just had sand and you run in the yard. So now we know where the yard starts. And most of those, since we found out, we're in the street. So we're going to have to pay some special and close consideration to the historic housing. Please do that. And Hudson Hill, Bayview. We're not looking at Bayview here today. We should be, because in our community plan, we express that we do not want industrial development west of Carolyn Street. We actually said we needed commercial and business east of Carolyn, and we could support that as a community. We have the capacity in this region to support that, but we did not want anything industrial coming west. Although since that time, Cardinal Capital Management that purchased Clearview, they got that front part zoned for light industrials. I think it may be some type of office warehouse complex in the front of Clearview. At least that was the plan a few years ago. You know, things change. So they happened to get that done even after we said we didn't want to zone anything. So please be aware of that. I'm just bringing this to your remembrance so we could be aware of it as we move forward. We had a conversation about duplexes, and I think the consensus was when I spoke to the city manager, he said, well, what do you all want? I said, we want what we already have to be in code and legal. He said, what is that? I said, we have single family housing, we have a sprinkling of duplexes, and we want the ability to have ADUs. We've always had the little houses, so we want that back. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, there was another conversation we needed to have on whether we wanted to allow for new duplexes or just be able to bring the ones that we have up to some type of code of standard. And I think you all expressed what you thought about that today, and that's why we needed to have the conversation. Thank you for letting them know, and we'll find out how that comes out. Single family residence, okay? And I just wanted to ask in closing, how many people actually live on Hudson Hill? Raise your hand. Okay. And property owners, raise your hand. Okay, so everybody needs to be represented, and thank everybody for coming. Thank you.
Alderwoman Lanier, I have a slide about that. I can actually show you some details about that site. I'll just bear with me one moment. All right. So the site of the former Clearview apartments was rezoned in 2018. This was the general development plan that was attached to that rezoning. So future development basically must follow the basic components of this plan. And so you can see it had apartments here. It had some attached housing here along Cleveland Street. And then this was meant to be neighborhood scale commercial towards Carolyn Street. So that was in 2018. And then there is actually a developer who has submitted a site permit for this western portion closer to Cleveland Street. That came in last year. Actually, excuse me, came in 2023. It is still under review, and it doesn't include the commercial part. They have indicated that potentially they could see that as more of a community center and senior housing instead of commercial, but that, you know, that's kind of undetermined right now. But this is, so they basically did follow the general development plan from the rezoning, but like I said, they have not completed the site permitting process. Once they complete that process, they would be allowed to start building this part of that area. Clearview Avenue, yes.
Is it going, are they going to dead end or make a roundabout to come out on that back street and kill them?
My understanding is that it would still go all the way through from Cleveland to Carolyn.
It's a big deal. This is a big deal. We met several times. We met on various occasions. I even encouraged the city to purchase a lot at Hudson Street for the purpose of creating space so they could turn around and route that traffic back up to Cleveland, so it won't have to come up Carolyn Street and through Hudson Hill. So we're talking about the city purchased a lot at the end of the street right here to your left. It was industrial because we wanted to make one. We also agreed that they could spread, they gathered some property back here. And we were doing that to give them the ability to route the traffic back out. Now, this doesn't even look like what we talked about. So it's always got to be a fight. We do not want that traffic coming through Carolyn Street. So please take that back. And Cleveland Street, Cleveland Street, we do not. And we are open to the duplexes or multi-houses in Bayview because that's what it always was. And so we're not doing anything different. That was PUD 25 at one point, and so that was multi at the time. And so we are open to that. There's a place for that. But we gotta make sure that whatever plan comes, have a design to not focus that traffic into this community. That's what we said, right? Yeah, all right.
All right. Oh, here we go. All right. So we do greatly appreciate everyone who joined us today. I heard a lot of good conversations, and of course, as y'all heard, we have differing opinions between, differing members of the neighborhood. So we're going to put all the responses that we got today together, and the city is going to try to come up with the set of zoning standards that fit the most closely with your notes, which obviously some of them will be in conflict with each other. We're going to try to make the best fit that we can based on what we hear from you. We're going to put that into a report and a poster, and we will bring those here to the Hudson Hill Community Center, and we'll have them posted here for most of the month of June, and you'll be able to come here at your convenience to look at those, and we'll have a means for you to leave notes with those materials so you can give us more feedback once you see those specific proposals. And then we'll also make materials from this meeting available on the city website, and we'll provide that information to the neighborhood association so it can be distributed to y'all, and you can have that available online as well. So that's our path forward from here. Like I said, we'd like to have those materials here in the community center most of the month of June, and we don't have the material set up online yet, of course, because we still have to compile them and prepare them, but we'll have that available soon. And so that wraps us up for today. I do want to thank President Jackson. Go ahead.
I think residents would like to know where we're going to have this discussion about the industrial and the properties that impact us.
Well, so I think the city had thought we would move towards the neighborhood commercial conversation first. That was one of the other action items from the neighborhood plan from 2019. But I think we're going to need to have some consultation coordination with the neighborhood president and you, Alderwoman, to figure out what, we're focused on this stage right now with the residential zoning, and we'll have to figure out what the next set of community conversations is going to be about. Okay. Thank you. All right, so that's noted. You have a question here?
Do you all have any further meetings regarding the creative subdivision and our suggestions so we can collaborate together?
We hadn't planned on it. At this point, that has been zoned for what you saw there. And so that developer, the property owner, has the right essentially to build that. And so it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for the city to take that right away from them at this point, since they have already gotten so far in that process.
And I understand that that's their right, but our rights as Hudson Hill residents, we would like to have the opportunity to make our proposal.
Yeah.
Have the streets blocked off, because if not, then all their traffic is going to infiltrate our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It's already being done by Union County.
Yeah.
Their infiltration of their employees coming through the residential community. So we're going to be impacted again, because that's a massive fluctuation of residents coming through the Hudson Hill community, especially where we have a
design for outcomes. You can design for failure, you can design for success. We're at a point now where we at the design stage, so there's no reason that we should design this so this traffic will come in here and inundate us. That's what I'm saying by representing the downtown. The city manager who work for me, who they work for. So I'm taking your message downtown. The other thing is I would like for you all to take this back that I removed one of my last functions when I left local government was to order equipment. So we were going to create this thing called SAGES. And we were going to bounce and pin these things off the satellite. So one of my last assignments was to purchase all this equipment. So SAGES, now if you look up anything with this geographic system, you're going to see this area say Clearview. This isn't Clearview. Clearview is one street. This is Hudson Hill, historic Hudson Hill. So if you all have some influence or input wherever it is in your line of responsibility, please try to make sure that when someone brings up GPS or any type of map, that the wording over our area does not say Clearview. This is Hudson Hill. Thank you.
So that's good to know, because I didn't know that. That's what's happening.
It's been entered.
Stages.
In any map you see, because it was entered, I saw like we had no sensitivity for our community, but it's an insult to me every time I pull up a map and I see one street name and not a historic community.
Okay, all right.
I just want to offer some feedback on the format of this meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure of the wisdom of this, what we've done today, of having everyone sit at individual tables and then report back, because there's no clear decision points that people are able to express a unified voice on.
Mm-hmm.
It's either every individual gets their say, or it gets kind of lost in this system that's guaranteed to keep us fragmented. Because when you go back to make a report today, you're going to say some tables were in favor of this, some tables were against that, the result being mixed opinions, which leaves us mired in no action.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have a unified voice, because no clear, direct questions were asked.
Okay.
So I hear that. I'm sorry, I know that's because I am a certified government analyst, operations analyst, and I hear what you're saying. So I know we can take this data and we could manipulate, massage this data, and let's create even a questionnaire type thing, Bridget, so we could individually count the responses.
First of all, I would say thank you all so much for being here today. Your comments are heard. What we're going to ask you all to do is to leave your notes on the table so we can have them to process them. And as John mentioned, what we're going to do is kind of take the information that we have here, put it in some form of recommendation where you all can review that, and then we'll continue to have that dialogue. We'll have the information here at the community center. We'll also have it posted online, and we also have your contact information that we can share it with you. So this is the first start of a dialogue with you all as we move forward with addressing residential, industrial, and commercial development within Hudson Hill. So we're excited to be here, and we're excited that we're taking the first step to move forward with this. But we still have a lot more work to do, and this is kind of our first step in moving forward in getting information and getting feedback from you all, residents and property owners, on where you want to go with future changes to the zoning. And so we've got great leadership that will help too.
In that information that you're gathering or you are from, when you come back, make sure we capture addresses. And the question I asked earlier, are you a resident or property owner, what type of people?
So John kind of outlined what's going to be happening next steps. We'll keep you abreast, and we thank you all so much for being here and taking this Saturday afternoon. And we look forward to working with you on a lot more issues. So thanks for being here. Thank you all.
Yep. Thanks, y'all.